During the company dinner, my boyfriend's childhood sweetheart accused me of stealing her diamond bracelet. In front of everyone, she rummaged through my bag, turning it upside down in disarray. When I suggested checking the surveillance footage to clear my name, my boyfriend Adrian said with a look of disdain, "Emma, even if your mother is ill and you're desperate for money, you can't resort to theft." Because of this one statement, everyone believed I was a thief. I was isolated by my colleagues and mocked by his childhood sweetheart. Later, I quietly left with my mother. However, my always aloof CEO boyfriend searched for me frantically for 5 years. After returning to the private room, everyone's gazes toward me were filled with strangeness. I had no mind to care about that and said to Adrian, "Adrian, I have something to attend to and must leave first." "Have fun, everyone." The hospital had just called me, saying that my mother was feeling down after chemotherapy and asking me to go accompany her. However, my boyfriend's childhood sweetheart, Cecilia, blocked my way. "Emma, are you rushing off to fence the stolen goods now?" I was utterly confused. "What do you mean by fencing stolen goods? You're still pretending. You're a thief, you stole my diamond bracelet." I furrowed my brows and looked at her. "Cecilia, I don't know anything about a bracelet, and I certainly didn't steal it." Cecilia looked at me with contempt. "Just now, everyone went out to watch the song and dance performance, and you were the only one who stayed in the private room. If not you, then who?" I didn't go to watch the performance because my mind was preoccupied with my mother's illness, leaving me no interest in enjoying it. Everything requires evidence. Slandering me without proof like this, I could sue you for defamation. Cecilia's gaze shifted to the bag in my hand. "You stole my bracelet and are now rushing to sell it. I bet the bracelet is still in your bag." She commanded, "Open your bag and let me check it." "Cecilia, that's just your assumption. I said I didn't take it, and you have no right to search my bag. I think you're clearly afraid." She directly reached out and snatched my canvas bag from my hand, unzipped it, and turned it upside down. A thick stack of medical treatment documents from the bag scattered all over the floor. Already feeling depressed lately because of my mother's illness, and now being treated so disrespectfully by her, I exploded in an instant. I directly grabbed my bag back from her hands and sternly rebuked, "Cecilia, do you have any manners at all?" However, Cecilia squatted down on her own and pulled out a sparkling blue diamond bracelet from the stack of documents. She held the bracelet up to my face and sneered, "Emma, what do you have to say now? You are a thief." I was momentarily stunned, looking at the bracelet in her hand. "I don't know. I didn't steal it." Cecilia scoffed, "The bracelet was in your bag. You say you didn't steal it, did it run in there by itself?" A colleague spoke up, "Could there be some misunderstanding? I've worked with Emma for 2 years, and I don't think she's that kind of person." Cecilia leisurely said, "You can know a person's face but not their heart. It's only been 2 years, if she deliberately disguised herself, how would you know?" After a brief panic, I calmed down. The bracelet wasn't stolen by me, yet it appeared in my bag. That must mean someone deliberately planted it to frame me. And the only person here who had a grudge against me was Cecilia, Adrian's childhood sweetheart who grew up with him. A month ago, she had just returned from Country M, and from the first moment she saw me, she targeted me in every way. I looked up at the camera in the corner of the ceiling and said, "Check the surveillance. I also want to know exactly how your bracelet ended up in my bag." Cecilia retorted without backing down, "Then check the surveillance. I'd like to see how you, the thief crying thief, will end up." At that moment, a colleague nearby pointed at the plug and said, "Look, the surveillance plug in this room has been pulled out." I raised my eyes to look at Cecilia. No wonder she wasn't panicking at all, she had prepared in advance. Cecilia immediately turned the tables. "Emma, it must have been you who pulled the plug, so you're hypocritically suggesting to check the surveillance. Who are you trying to fool?" But did she think this would pin the theft on me? I directly said, "Then let's call the police and let them clear my name. If it really was me who pulled the plug and stole the bracelet, then my fingerprints would definitely be on the plug, your bag, and the bracelet." I took out my phone to dial the police. Seeing this, Cecilia panicked instantly and pretended to be magnanimous. The bracelet has been recovered now, and I don't want to pursue it further. Once we call the police, it would be negative publicity for Adrian's company. Let's just drop this matter. But for me, this matter isn't over. Your bracelet wasn't stolen by me. Unless you admit today that you deliberately planted the bracelet to frame me, I will definitely call the police. I stared directly at her, waiting for her choice. However, Cecilia suddenly shifted her gaze, looking aggrieved at Adrian. Adrian, for your sake, I've already given her enough face. If she insists on making a fuss now, the one who will be embarrassed is you. Adrian pursed his lips and looked at me, a trace of disappointment flashing in his eyes. I reiterated to him, Adrian, I didn't steal. Adrian interrupted me, all right, this matter ends here. No one is allowed to mention it again. I couldn't hide the disappointment in my heart. Not only did Adrian not speak up for me, but he also chose this ambiguous statement. If this matter wasn't investigated clearly today, I might carry the suspicion of being a thief for the rest of my life. I firmly shook my head, no, I must clear my name today. Adrian furrowed his brows, saying impatiently, Emma, that's enough. Are you addicted to pretending? I know your mom is ill, and you're in urgent need of money now, so you targeted Cecilia's bracelet. I stared at him blankly and murmured, you don't believe me? Adrian adopted a superior posture, how can I believe you? You have the motive, and the witnesses and evidence are all there. Emma, I've already said I'd help with the money. Did you have to do something like this? I looked up blankly at Adrian, it was the same face, but at this moment, it felt incredibly unfamiliar to me. Adrian was the company president, and with his words, the other people in the company immediately followed suit and began condemning me. I never thought our company would have a thief, this is truly a disgrace. I saw long ago that she had sticky fingers. The rose tea I brought to the company kept disappearing, it must have been her. She really doesn't miss any opportunity for gain. I strongly suggest firing her. Fire her. Adrian said with a dark face, all right, no one is allowed to mention this matter again from now on. Everyone immediately fell silent, but their gazes toward me were all filled with contempt and disdain. The hospital called again. After answering, I immediately left the private room. The cold wind outside was biting, but it couldn't compare to the chill in my heart at that moment. A Rolls-Royce stopped beside me, the window rolled down, revealing half of Adrian's handsome side profile. I chose to ignore it and continued walking forward. Adrian said in a deep voice, get in quickly. Do you want others to see? No need for Adrian to trouble yourself, this way, there's no risk of being seen. I hailed a taxi and got in. Adrian and I had been in a relationship for 3 years, but it was always secret. Initially, it was me who didn't want to make it public because I wasn't sure about the longevity of this relationship, and I didn't want to face flattery from colleagues at the company. But ever since his childhood sweetheart returned, everything changed. His attitude toward me became increasingly impatient, and his disdain was evident. I thought this relationship should end. After arriving at the hospital and comforting my mother, I considered resigning. However, my mother's illness required money right now. If I resigned, I had to find a new job first and couldn't act rashly. From that day on, everyone in the company fawned over Cecilia and, under her lead, isolated me. During meetings, they deliberately didn't call me, making me get reprimanded in front of everyone. Water stains would inexplicably appear on my seat. At mealtimes, I was always left with only cold leftovers. In just 1 week, I lost several pounds. That noon, as I came down from delivering documents upstairs, I saw a group of them blocking the company entrance, pointing at my mother. What do you think about Emma's theft at the company? They say if a child is not taught, it's the father's fault. I heard Emma lost her father at a young age, so her thieving behavior must have been learned from you, her mother. My mother, pale-faced, defended me. She said I had been an obedient good child since young and definitely wouldn't steal. She also said that although she had little education, she would never teach her daughter to do bad things. But everyone treated her words as a joke, continuously sneering and mocking. Someone even reached out and pushed my mother. Due to long-term chemotherapy, her body was extremely weak, and she fell to the ground instantly. The lunchbox in her hand spilled all over the place. I immediately rushed forward and pushed the crowd away. "Get lost. All of you get lost." The perpetrator still spoke sarcastically. I just lightly pushed her, and she fell to the ground like that. Who knows if you mother and daughter are so poor that you're trying to extort money? I stepped forward and grabbed her collar. "My mom is a tumor patient. If anything happens to her today, I won't let you off. If she's sick, she should stay in the hospital. Who let her come out to harm others?" From childhood to adulthood, my mother has been my sore spot. I raised my hand to strike her, but my mother grabbed my wrist. "Emma, don't." My mother and I had depended on each other since I was young, with no one to rely on, so she was very afraid of me causing trouble outside and offending people. In the end, I didn't strike, just pushed her away harshly. My gaze fell on my mother. "Mom, how are you? Are you uncomfortable anywhere?" My mother shook her head. "I'm fine," she said guiltily. "It's just that the food I made for you spilled. It's all Mom's fault for being useless. I'll make it again when I get back." Yesterday, when I visited my mother in the hospital, she saw how thin I had become and blamed herself for dragging me down, telling me not to spend more money on her treatment. I told her it was just because I missed her cooking so much, and once she recovered, she must cook delicious meals for me every day to fatten me up. Unexpectedly, today she made my favorite 4 happiness meatballs. I could imagine how much effort it took for her to make this dish while dragging her weak, pained body. I directly picked up a meatball that had fallen on the ground, took a bite, and said, "Mom's cooking is still so delicious." My mother immediately became anxious, tears welling up in her eyes. "Emma, don't eat it. Wait for Mom to make it again when I get back." At that moment, a black Rolls-Royce stopped, and Cecilia opened the door and got out from the passenger seat, glancing at me. She said to Adrian in the driver's seat, "Adrian, the company doesn't have a rule forcing people to eat garbage off the ground, does it?" Adrian got out of the driver's seat with a livid face, glanced disdainfully at me and my mother, and first dispersed the crowd. Then, he said to me in an unhappy tone, "Emma, how have I ever mistreated you? First stealing, now picking up garbage to eat. What face are you slapping here?" I looked at him with eyes full of disappointment. "Adrian, I didn't steal anything, and this isn't garbage, it's food my mom made for me with her own hands." My mother also anxiously explained, "Emma definitely wouldn't steal. There must be a misunderstanding, Emma wouldn't steal." Adrian walked away with a cold face. My mother chased after him, still trying to explain, but Adrian disdainfully avoided her and walked into the company without looking back. Watching Adrian's back, my heart sank to the bottom again. Was this the man I had loved for 3 years? My mother, overcome with anxiety, fainted on the spot. I quickly called 120 and sent her to the hospital. After some resuscitation, she was finally out of danger. The doctor told me that my mother's condition was not optimistic now. He knew of a hospital in Yunchuan City that specialized in treating this illness, with treatment costs around 500,000 yuan. He advised me to transfer her there as soon as possible. I sat in the hospital corridor, pondering for a long time. 500,000 yuan? Where could I get so much money now? At that moment, a pair of silver high heels adorned with diamonds appeared before me. I looked up and met Cecilia's haughty face. She directly handed me a bank card. "Emma, I know you're short on money now. There's 500,000 yuan in here. Take this money and never appear in front of Adrian again." If it were the old me, I would have thrown her card back harshly and told her with my head held high that I would leave Adrian, but not because of her, simply because I wanted to leave. But now, my mother's illness was the most important. She had raised me through hardships, and I could never abandon her. In the end, I bowed my head to Cecilia and took the card. "I will leave. Consider this money as a loan from you." She curled her lips into a smug smile. "I've said long ago that you and Adrian are not from the same world. Adrian dating you was just a temporary novelty for fun. Only he and I are the most suitable pair. I softly offered my blessings, then I wish you an early birth of a noble son and 100 years of harmony. Cecilia left satisfied, carrying her bag. Not long after she left, I received a call. Hello, is this Miss Emma? Who is this? I'm the manager of the Grey Hotel. Today, during our surveillance maintenance, we discovered that the camera had a backup battery. The footage from the day the bracelet was stolen in your private room was recorded from beginning to end. I think this surveillance might be useful to you. I looked at the thin bank card in my hand and pondered for a long time. In the end, I asked him to send me a copy of the surveillance but chose not to expose Cecilia. 5 years later, I was very glad for the decision to bring my mother to Yunchuan City for treatment. Her illness had been cured, and now she just needed good recuperation. I had also found a new job in Yunchuan City with a considerable income. I transferred the final payment into Cecilia's card, making a total of 600,000 yuan, with the extra 100,000 as interest to Cecilia. Having resolved this major burden that had weighed on me, my mood became incredibly light. After work, I rode my electric bike home as usual, but unexpectedly, someone suddenly stepped out in the neighborhood hallway and blocked my path. This was an old neighborhood without elevators, and the stairwell lights were long in disrepair, making it impossible to see his appearance clearly. I was startled and about to shout when the person suddenly hugged me. Emma, I've finally found you. The somewhat familiar voice sounded in my ear. After a long moment, I asked in surprise, Adrian? Adrian immediately replied, it's me. Why did you leave without a word back then? For these 5 years, I've been searching for you. I raised my hand and pushed Adrian away forcefully. Adrian, I'm just a minor employee. What do you want with me? Adrian's gaze fixed on me tightly in the darkness. Emma, have you forgotten? Besides being my employee, you're also my girlfriend. How could a thief like me deserve the prestigious title of Adrian's girlfriend? Adrian, you've got the wrong person. Adrian said in a low voice, are you still angry about what happened back then? But back then, it was clearly you who had crooked thoughts and stole Cecilia's bracelet. In that situation, what could I do? Twist right and wrong in front of everyone? So much time had passed, yet Adrian still firmly believed I stole the bracelet. I really wanted to show him that surveillance footage and slap him in the face hard. But when I first got the footage, I chose to yield for that 500,000 yuan. Now, there was no need to settle scores with Cecilia after the fact or expose her. Those people and events from the past had nothing to do with me anymore. I just needed to live my current life well. Adrian, there's nothing more to say between us. Please leave. I directly bypassed him and went upstairs. Adrian followed behind me all the way, but in the end, I shut the door in his face. Unexpectedly, the next day when I went downstairs to work, I saw him again. His clothes were unchanged, and he looked somewhat haggard, as if he had slept in the car overnight. He blocked my path. Emma, I think we should have a proper talk. Adrian, I don't think there's anything left to talk about between us. I need to hurry to work, please step aside. Adrian's voice suddenly carried a hint of grievance. Emma, these years I've really searched for you painstakingly. I said coldly, that has nothing to do with me. I didn't ask you to search for me, nor do I need you to. Please don't disturb my life anymore. From that day on, I didn't see Adrian for half a month and thought he had given up. However, he directly became our company's partner and specified that I and the project manager go to his company to discuss business. Upon hearing this request, I immediately refused and asked her to take someone else. Linda pulled me aside and kindly advised, Emma, as long as we can sign this cooperation, the bonus will be 200,000 yuan. Then you can improve your mother's life. Her words moved me a bit. My mother had raised me through hardships, then fell seriously ill and suffered greatly. Looking back on her first half of life, she hadn't had many good days. With this 200,000 yuan, our quality of life could improve significantly. Linda added, Emma, in these years at the company, your serious and diligent work has been seen by everyone, and the leaders appreciate you greatly. But if you refuse this job because of personal issues, think about whether you'll have promotion opportunities in the company in the future. Linda's words made sense. Good jobs are hard to find now, and losing the job because of this refusal would be a net loss. The events from back then had passed so long ago, I shouldn't let past matters affect my current life. After deep thought, I finally nodded and went with her. The next day, the manager and I booked flight tickets and flew to Jinghai City. After 5 years, returning to Zhejiang Group, its decoration was even more grand and luxurious than before. And my mood was completely different from when I left. After explaining our purpose at the front desk, staff immediately came to lead us to the conference room. Adrian, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, sat in the main seat, showing no trace of the haggardness and fatigue from when he was downstairs at my home. Cecilia, sitting beside him, changed her expression upon seeing me. "Emma? How is it you?" I curved a faint smile on my face. "Miss Cecilia, long time no see." Cecilia looked at Linda beside me with a mocking expression. "You might not know, but Emma was once our company's employee. She stole my diamond bracelet, was caught red-handed by me, and couldn't stay in the company, so she resigned." "How dare your company employ such an employee?" Adrian, sitting in his position, said in a deep voice. "Cecilia, I've already said not to mention the matter from back then. Leave." Cecilia could hardly believe what she heard and asked uncertainly again. "Adrian, you're telling me to leave?" "That's right, leave." Cecilia stood up directly and ran out angrily and aggrieved. After she left, Adrian calmly discussed the cooperation with us. The talks went exceptionally smoothly, with basic details already settled. After the cooperation talks, Adrian looked up at Linda. "Emma and I have some private matters to discuss. Please go back first." Linda immediately stood up. Okay, no problem." The spacious and luxurious conference room now had only Adrian and me left. I sat quietly in the chair, waiting for him to speak. Adrian had gone to such lengths to get me here, he definitely wouldn't do nothing. After a long while, Adrian spoke to me. "Emma, I know you had conflicts with Cecilia back then. As long as you're willing to return to my side, I'll make her leave the company." I curled my lips into a slight arc and chuckled lightly. "You think I left back then because of Cecilia? Isn't that the case? Besides Cecilia, I can't think of any other reason for you to leave me." Although my leaving back then was indeed related to Cecilia, she was just the trigger. What truly chilled my heart was Adrian not believing me and his indifferent attitude toward my mother. "Adrian, why don't you look for reasons in yourself? And why don't you think that maybe it's because I don't love you anymore?" Adrian denied this idea without thinking. "Impossible. A woman who was willing to climb 999 steps for me, kowtowing until her head was bloody, just to seek a peace talisman for me. I don't believe you would suddenly stop loving me." He took out his wallet, removed the peace talisman from it, and placed it in front of me. "Emma, this is proof of your love." Looking at this yellowed and worn peace talisman before me, some long-sealed memories resurfaced in my mind. At that time, Adrian and I had just started dating not long ago, and accidents big and small kept happening around him. The most serious was a car accident where he nearly perished in flames. I heard that the peace talismans from Lingyin Temple on Taihang Mountain were very effective, able to ward off disasters and ensure safety. So I dragged Adrian to go worship and seek one. But upon arriving, I learned that to seek a peace talisman, one must kowtow at every step, climb 999 stone steps, and show utmost sincerity and devotion to obtain it. Upon hearing this, Adrian turned to leave, saying he never believed in such supernatural nonsense. He didn't believe, but I didn't want to risk his safety even slightly. So I had him wait at the bottom, and then I ascended the 999 cold, hard steps, kowtowing at each one. When I descended with the peace talisman, my forehead was scraped, and my knees were swollen red. Adrian held me tightly in distress, saying I was too foolish. How could there be a woman as silly and loving as me? Now thinking back, I was indeed foolishly naive. I raised my hand and tore the peace talisman in front of me to shreds. Adrian hurriedly tried to stop me upon seeing this, but it was too late. I scattered the pieces on the ground and said to him word by word, Adrian, that foolish woman who loved you back then can never return. A crack of collapse appeared on Adrian's usually cold face, his eyes red as he looked at me. Emma, how could you tear this? I said faintly, this was originally mine, I can tear it if I want. Adrian roared, but you already gave it to me, so it's mine. After roaring, he squatted down and carefully picked up the pieces of the peace talisman one by one, as if it were his beloved treasure. Watching his actions, I couldn't help but find it somewhat amusing. Adrian, you never really loved me. What's the point of this hypocritical act now? Adrian looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Emma, do you have a heart, woman? If I didn't love you, would I search for you all over the country for 5 years after you left? If I didn't love you, would I carefully preserve the peace talisman you gave me like this? At that moment, I suddenly lost the desire to argue with him. Perhaps he had loved me once, but so what? It was he who didn't believe me, he who disdained me, and he who allowed Cecilia to bully and mock me. I seriously told him again, but I don't love you anymore. After saying that, I turned and left the conference room. After a few steps, Cecilia blocked my path and raised her hand to slap me. Bitch! Didn't I tell you never to appear in front of Adrian again? I wiped the blood from the corner of my lips with my fingers, then raised my hand and slapped her back hard. Cecilia seemed completely unprepared for my counterattack, and she was instantly knocked to the ground. She looked at me incredulously. You dare hit me? Cecilia, I'm no longer the Emma you could bully as you pleased. I looked at her mockingly. 5 years, and you still can't win Adrian, yet you only dare vent on me. As a woman, I look down on you. This sentence instantly broke Cecilia's defenses, and she roared, it's all because of you, you bitch, seducing Adrian and making him unable to forget you. Emma, I definitely won't let you off. I said in an icy tone. Cecilia, that should be my line to you. If you continue targeting me like this, I won't let you off anymore. 5 years ago, I still kept the video of her framing me for theft. If Cecilia dared to ruin her good days by troubling me again, I wouldn't mind letting that video see the light of day. The door opened behind me. Cecilia, who had been fierce and threatening, instantly turned pitiful. Adrian, she hit me. Adrian walked over, glanced only once at Cecilia on the ground, then shifted his gaze to my swollen cheek, wanting to touch it. I directly blocked his hand and left without hesitation. In the following days, Adrian would call me to the company every day under the pretext of discussing cooperation. Each time I came, he would repeat the same old lines. He no longer blamed me for leaving without a word back then and asked me to return to his side. He even fired Cecilia from the company, saying it was to prove his determination to me. I turned a deaf ear to this, letting it go in one ear and out the other. In my mind, I had already started planning how to use the 200,000 yuan bonus once I got back. First, rent a spacious and bright house, then take mom to buy 2 new outfits, then take her to eat steak, and then... Emma, are you listening to me? Emma! Adrian's roar brought me back to reality. I checked the time on my phone. Sorry, Adrian, it's time to get off work. I'll leave first. As soon as I stepped out of the conference room door, I heard crashing sounds from behind, tables and chairs being kicked over. Finally, I endured until this Saturday's signing ceremony. Once the signing was complete, Linda and I would have successfully accomplished our task and could return. This cooperation was the first interprovincial collaboration between 2 major companies, and on the day of the signing ceremony, many business elites came in person to show support. Just as everything was about to settle, Cecilia burst in with 4 or 5 people. Upon closer look, I realized the group she brought was exactly those who had followed her back then, isolating and mocking me. After I left back then, Adrian had fired all of them. It was impressive that Cecilia, after 5 years, could still find them one by one. Cecilia pointed at me in front of everyone. Emma is a thief. Your company dares to reuse Emma, aren't you afraid of financial theft in the future? The group that came with Cecilia immediately echoed, that's right, she stole Cecilia's diamond bracelet back then. We are all witnesses. Emma has character issues. Any company that hires her is really unlucky. Using a habitual thief as an employee, I'm afraid this company isn't upright either. Everyone, make sure to dig into this company properly. Only then did I notice that one of them was holding a phone and live streaming. Her purpose was easy to guess, simply to ruin my reputation in such a big occasion today, so no company would dare hire me. Immediately, many people's gazes turned toward me, starting to whisper and point. Linda spoke up for me in front of everyone. I believe Emma isn't a thief, there must be a misunderstanding in this matter. That day in the conference room, Cecilia deliberately said in front of Linda that I was a thief and resigned because I couldn't stay in the company. After returning, Linda had asked me what really happened. I only told her that I wasn't a thief and had never done anything violating laws or morals. Whether to believe me was up to her. She had affirmatively said, she believes me. I thought she was just saying it, but today she defended me in front of so many people, showing me with actions that she truly believed me, which couldn't help but send a warm current through my heart. Cecilia immediately said disdainfully, back then, she was caught with the stolen bracelet red-handed, witnessed by many. What's the use of your belief? I advise you to fire Emma from the company quickly, or I'll expose your company's information online. Linda said righteously, an upright person fears no crooked shadow. Our company has always abided by laws and regulations, we're not afraid of your exposure. You keep saying Emma is a thief, then produce evidence. Otherwise, you're just rumor-mongering and slandering. The group beside Cecilia immediately said, we are all witnesses, we saw her steal back then with our own eyes. Linda said disdainfully, you were all brought by Cecilia, who knows if you're not colluding with her? Your words have no credibility. Cecilia stepped forward confidently, if their words aren't credible, then Adrian should be. She looked at Adrian, Adrian, you were there during Emma's theft back then. Tell everyone if this is true. In an instant, everyone's gazes focused on Adrian, once again reaching the point where his words could decide my innocence. The only difference was that this time, I was no longer passive. I pulled up the surveillance video on my phone, ready to project it on the big screen at any moment. Adrian frowned, Cecilia, you're becoming more and more unreasonable. Leave with them quickly, or don't blame me for being impolite. Cecilia clung to his words, you didn't deny it because Emma is a shameful thief, a stealer. Adrian said sternly, Cecilia, enough. Although Emma made a mistake once, your bracelet has been found, what more do you want? This statement seemed to defend me but effectively confirmed my guilt of theft. Before Cecilia could rejoice, I directly projected the surveillance video onto the big screen. On the screen, Cecilia was clearly seen stuffing her own diamond bracelet into my bag while everyone was distracted, then accusing me of theft and rummaging through my bag. The truth was presented before everyone, and the thief stigma I had carried for 5 years was finally cleared. In the face of such solid evidence, the crowd's discussion shifted from me to Cecilia. Cecilia looked at me in panic, how do you have the surveillance? I clearly pulled the power plug back then. You did pull the plug, but this surveillance model uses both power and battery, so your actions were still recorded. Cecilia questioned, since you had the video, why didn't you bring it out back then and wait until now? I looked at her, Cecilia, originally I planned never to bring out this surveillance in my lifetime. Back then, my mom was ill, and you gave me 500,000 yuan to make me leave Adrian, saving my mom's life. Although I've now returned it to you with interest, I'm still grateful for your money. It's you who kept pressing aggressively and refused to let me go. So the one crying thief all along was her. She looks young, but her mind is truly vicious. Whoever marries her in the future is really unlucky for 8 generations. Cecilia, who had been pampered from childhood to adulthood, had never heard so many criticisms and immediately screamed as she ran out. Adrian looked at me with eyes full of guilt, Emma, I'm sorry. It was my misunderstanding before. I never thought it was Cecilia who directed and acted it out herself. He never thought Cecilia would stage a play just to frame me, yet repeatedly believed I was the thief. I no longer wanted to say these things to him, as it was meaningless. I smiled and said, Adrian, let's sign the contract quickly. After the contract was signed, I didn't want to stay a moment longer and flew back to Yunchuan City with Linda that afternoon. Afterward, Adrian would fly to Yunchuan City every week, seeking my forgiveness. He stubbornly believed that as long as he persisted, one day his sincerity would move me, and I would forgive him and go back with him. But under Linda's matchmaking, I was already with her son Jason. On the day Jason and I got married, Adrian, looking disheveled, knocked on my door. He handed me a red marriage talisman. "Emma, this is what I sought overnight last night. Please don't leave me, don't marry Jason." I took the marriage talisman from his hand, and hope ignited in his eyes. Then, in front of him, I tore it to shreds. "Adrian, the fate between us is gone. Please don't entangle me anymore." Entangle? He couldn't believe I would use these two words to describe him. I nodded heavily. "That's right, it's entanglement. Adrian, I'm about to get married, what else is this if not entanglement?" Adrian looked up at me for a long time, finally leaving full of disappointment. And I joyfully married Jason. Much later, I learned that after Adrian left my place that day, Cecilia went to entangle him again. In a moment of impulse, he drove into Cecilia, ultimately leaving her paralyzed from the waist down, a cripple confined to bed for life, while Adrian himself was sentenced to 10 years in prison for it. Upon hearing this news, I couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, I was very glad to have escaped early from the vortex of this madman and crazy woman, now possessing a happy family.